The two suns of Silurian 9, one violet, one pale pink, cast an unforgiving glare across the endless salt flats. Their light refracted off the crystalline surface, creating a blinding spectacle that forced Leah Shin to squint as she stepped from the transport shuttle. The dry, saline air immediately assaulted her nostrils, carrying microscopic salt particles that glittered in suspension around her. "Welcome to Inmara Outpost," announced Commander Rawletkar, a tall figure silhouetted against the entrance of the domed structure. "First time on a hypersaline planet?" Leah nodded, adjusting the collar of her environment suit. "First time anywhere outside Earth's solar system. Actually..." The commander's expression remained unreadable behind his protective mask, but his voice carried a hint of amusement. "Then, you're in for quite an initiation. This is one of the harshest environments in the Galactic Union's exploration catalog." Leah followed him toward the outpost, a collection of interconnected metallic domes, wrapped in mylar insulation and composite plating. The structures seemed to ripple under the dual suns, an optical illusion caused by heat waves rising from the salt plains. In the distance, the flat expanse of white stretched to the horizon, unbroken and eerily beautiful in its desolation. Inside the main airlock, Leah felt the decontamination system pulse around her, stripping away salt particles before the inner door hissed open. The sudden drop in temperature as she entered the climate-controlled interior made her shiver. "You'll get used to the temperature swings," said Commander Rawletkar, removing his mask to reveal the characteristic ridged features of his species. "Your quarters are in Dome C. Get settled, then join us in the command hub for the project briefing at 14 hours. Leah's small quarters contained little more than a cot, storage compartment, and a narrow viewport that framed a slice of the salt plain outside. She unpacked her meager belongings, mostly technical manuals, tools, and a few personal items, before checking the time. She had less than an hour before the briefing. As she made her way through the outpost's curved corridors, Leah studied the facility's layout. The prefabricated structure was typical of frontier research installations, utilitarian, compact, and designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Various alien species passed her in the hallways, some nodding in acknowledgement, others too preoccupied with their work to notice the newcomer. The command hub occupied the center of the main dome, a circular room dominated by holographic displays and monitoring equipment. Several researchers were already gathered around a large table when Leah entered. Among them stood a tall, slender Arcath with pale blue skin and elongated fingers. His posture exuded authority, and the other researchers seemed to defer to him with a mixture of respect and caution. "Ah, the new electromechanical engineer," the Arcath said, turning to face Leah. "I am Professor Tarshan Vok, lead xenobiologist and project coordinator." "Leah Shin," she replied, extending her hand before remembering that Arcaths didn't practice handshakes. She awkwardly lowered it. "I'm here to maintain the outpost's power systems." "Indeed," Professor Vok said with a slight tilt of his head. "Though I wonder why the Union sent us a human specialist. The equipment here is primarily galactic standard." Before Leah could respond, Commander Rawletkar called the meeting to order. "Let's begin the project orientation. Professor Vok will present the latest findings from our preliminary surveys." Professor Vok moved to the center of the room, activating a holographic display that showed microscopic images of soil samples. "Our mission on Silurian 9 is to catalog potential xenobiological adaptations in extreme saline environments. However, after 3 months of extensive sampling and analysis, I can definitively state that no life, not even microbial, survives in the salt fields surrounding this outpost." Murmurs rippled through the assembled researchers. Leah noticed a younger Arcath nodding vigorously, clearly a devoted student of the professor. "The salt concentration is simply too extreme," Vok continued. "The osmotic pressure would rupture cellular membranes of any organism we've encountered, Any attempts to cultivate or sustain life in these salt plains would be utterly futile. The holographic display shifted to show various analysis charts, all indicating negative results for biological markers. We will now shift our focus to deeper substrate layers, where conditions might be marginally more hospitable. But the surface remains, for all intents and purposes, sterile. As the briefing continued, Leah's attention drifted to the power management displays around the room's perimeter. She noted fluctuating energy levels and irregular patterns in the consumption metrics, signs of an unstable power grid. She made mental notes to check the primary generators and distribution network as soon as possible. The meeting concluded with assignment distributions. As the newest arrival, Leah received a standard orientation package and maintenance schedule from a taciturn cyborg technician named Draj Kul. "You'll want to inspect the auxiliary generators first," Kul advised, his mechanical eye whirring as it focused on her. "The main power system has been temperamental since the last salt storm." "Salt storm?" Leah asked. "You'll see," the cyborg replied cryptically. "Forecasts show another one approaching in approximately 48 hours. Better familiarize yourself with the emergency protocols before then." The rest of Leah's first day passed in a blur of technical inspections and system diagnostics. The outpost's power infrastructure was indeed in worse condition than she'd anticipated. Corroded connections, salt-damaged insulation, and outdated surge protectors. She worked methodically, prioritizing critical systems and making a list of components that needed immediate replacement. As the alien sun set, casting long, purple shadows across the salt plains, Leah stood at the viewport in her quarters, watching darkness envelop the crystalline landscape. In the distance, she could see faint electrical discharges flickering above the horizon, the leading edge of the approaching salt storm. "Just another day in paradise," she murmured to herself before turning in for the night. The next morning, Leah awoke to an unusual stillness. The ambient hum of the environmental systems was missing, and her quarters were noticeably warmer than they should be. She checked her communicator. No power alerts had been issued, which was strange given the obvious malfunction. She dressed quickly and made her way to the command hub, where she found Commander Etkar and Professor Vok engaged in a heated discussion. "Cannot delay the sample collection schedule," Vok was saying, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of stress. "The deeper substrate analysis is time-sensitive. We don't have sufficient power reserves for non-essential operations," Etkar replied firmly. "The approaching storm is larger than anticipated. We need to conserve energy for life support and defensive systems." Leah cleared her throat. "Excuse me, but what exactly happened to our power supply?" Both aliens turned to her, seemingly surprised by her presence. "Ah, Engineer Shin," Etkar said. "We experienced a significant power surge during the night. Static discharge from the salt plain. It's damaged the main power distribution node." "Why wasn't I alerted?" Leah asked, moving to the nearest monitoring station to assess the damage. "The alert system was also compromised," the commander admitted. "We've been operating on auxiliary power since 0300 hours. Leah's fingers flew across the interface, bringing up system diagnostics. The situation was worse than she'd feared. The main distribution node had experienced a complete failure, and the backup systems were already at 67% capacity depletion. "We have less than 24 hours of reserve power," she announced. "And that's assuming we implement strict conservation measures immediately." Professor Vok's elongated fingers twitched in what Leah recognized as an Arcath expression of frustration. "This is unacceptable. The sample degradation will compromise months of research." "I'm more concerned about life support failure," Leah countered. "Without power, the environmental systems will shut down. Temperature regulation, air filtration, water recycling, all gone." "Can you repair the main distribution node?" Commander Etkar asked. Leah shook her head. "Not without replacement parts. The surge melted critical components. We'd need a supply drop from the nearest Union outpost, which would take at least 7 standard days to arrive, the commander concluded grimly. The command hub grew increasingly crowded as other research team members arrived, each bringing reports of system failures throughout the outpost. Panic began to spread as the reality of their situation became clear. "Silence!" Commander Atkar's voice cut through the chaos. "We need solutions, not hysteria." Leah stood quietly, her mind racing through potential alternatives. An idea began to form. Unlikely, perhaps even desperate, but not impossible. "I might have a way to generate emergency power," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. All eyes turned to her. "The salt," she continued. "We could use it to create rudimentary galvanic cells, salt batteries." Professor Vox's expression shifted from surprise to dismissal. "Primitive chemical batteries? That's your solution." "It's not elegant," Leah admitted. "But it's feasible with the materials we have. I built something similar for a school project when I was younger. Basic chemistry, salt water as an electrolyte, copper and zinc as electrodes." "The power output would be negligible," objected one of the Arcath researchers, Soren Vale, according to her name badge. "Certainly not enough to power an outpost of this size." "Not for everything," Leah agreed, "but possibly enough for critical systems until help arrives. We have metal components we can repurpose, plenty of salt, and I saw some carbon rods in the storage bay that could serve as electrodes." Professor Vox made a dismissive gesture. "This is absurd. We're scientists with access to advanced technology, not primitives rubbing sticks together to make fire." "With respect, Professor," Leah countered, "sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable. And right now, reliability is what we need." Commander Atkar studied her for a moment. "How quickly could you assemble these salt batteries?" "I'd need help," Leah said, "and access to the workshop and storage facilities. But I could have a prototype ready within hours." The commander nodded decisively. "Do it. Take whatever resources and personnel you need." Professor Vox's objection was immediate. "Commander, this is a waste of precious time and materials. We should focus on protecting the research samples and—" "The decision is made, Professor," Atkar interrupted. "Your samples won't matter if we all suffocate when life support fails." As the meeting dispersed, Leah found herself approached by Jirik Tal, a young Arcath engineer with curious eyes and a nervous demeanor. "I'd like to assist with your battery project," he said. "My specialty is conductive materials." "Perfect," Leah smiled. "We'll need all the expertise we can get. Let's head to the workshop." Over the next several hours, Leah and a small team of volunteers transformed a corner of the maintenance workshop into an improvised battery production facility. They scavenged copper wiring from non-essential systems, repurposed zinc plating from storage containers, and collected salt samples from the exterior collection points. "The salt concentration needs to be precise," Leah explained, as she mixed a solution in a large container. "Too dilute, and we won't get enough current. Too saturated, and the ions won't move efficiently." "Fascinating," Jirik commented, watching the process with evident interest. "I've studied theoretical electrolysis, but never implemented such a basic application." Draj Kul, the cyborg technician, joined their efforts, his mechanical appendages proving invaluable for the precise cutting and shaping of metal electrodes. "My creators would find this amusingly retro," he remarked dryly. Their first prototype was crude, a simple cell with copper and zinc electrodes immersed in a salt solution, connected by salvaged wiring to a small LED indicator. When Leah completed the circuit, the team held their breath. The LED remained dark. "Adjust the electrode spacing," Leah instructed, refusing to be discouraged. "And let's try a different salt concentration." 3 iterations later, the LED flickered weakly, then glowed steadily. A cheer went up from the assembled team members. "It works!" Jirik exclaimed, his pale blue skin flushing slightly with excitement. Barely, Leah cautioned. This is just one cell producing minimal voltage. We'll need dozens, maybe hundreds, connected in series and parallel to generate useful power. As they worked to refine and replicate the battery design, word spread throughout the outpost. Some researchers came to observe out of curiosity, others out of desperation. Professor Vach remained conspicuously absent. By evening, they had constructed a bank of 20 interconnected salt cells that produced enough electricity to power a small cooling fan. It was modest progress, but far from what they needed. "We need to scale up," Leah told her tired team. "Larger electrodes, more efficient connections, and we need to figure out how to maintain the batteries once they're operational. The electrodes will corrode rapidly in this setup." As they debated improvements, the outpost's emergency klaxon blared. Commander Atkar's voice came over the communication system. "Attention all personnel. The salt storm has accelerated and intensified. It will reach the outpost in approximately 2 hours. Complete storm preparations immediately and report to your designated shelter areas." Leah looked at her team, their faces reflecting her own concern. "We're out of time for refinements. We need to build as many cells as possible in the next hour and connect them to the critical systems hub." They worked frantically, assembly line style. Jirik and 2 other engineers prepared the salt solutions. Draj cut and shaped electrodes with mechanical precision, while Leah and the remaining team members wired the cells together in an expanding network. "This configuration should give us about 50 volts, Leah explained, as she connected the final cells. "Enough to power the emergency life support system, but not much else." As the storm's leading edge reached the outpost, the entire structure began to vibrate. Through the viewports, they could see crackling electrical discharges illuminating the darkened salt plains, like blue-white veins spreading across the white expanse. "Static buildup," Draj observed. "The salt particles in the air create an immense electrical potential. That's what caused the surge that fried our systems." With minutes to spare, they connected their makeshift battery bank to the emergency life support controls. Leah held her breath as she activated the circuit, praying that their improvised power source wouldn't immediately overload. The control panel flickered, went dark for a heart-stopping moment, then illuminated with a steady green glow. The ventilation system hummed to life, circulating filtered air throughout the shelter areas. "It's working," Jirik whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. Their celebration was short-lived. As the full force of the salt storm enveloped the outpost, the structure groaned under the assault of wind-driven salt particles and electrical discharges. The lights flickered ominously as power fluctuations rippled through the remaining operational systems. "The batteries are straining," Leah observed, monitoring the output. "The electrodes are corroding faster than I anticipated." Through the night, they worked in shifts to maintain the battery bank, replacing corroded electrodes and refreshing depleted salt solutions. Every hour brought new challenges as the storm intensified, testing both their improvised power system and the structural integrity of the outpost itself. In the early hours of the morning, Leah was startled by the appearance of Professor Vach in the maintenance workshop. The Arcath xenobiologist looked haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from hours in the research lab. "Engineer Shin," he acknowledged stiffly. "I see your primitive solution is holding." "Barely," Leah admitted, too tired for pretense. "But it's keeping us alive." The professor studied the battery bank with clinical detachment. "I've been monitoring the power output from my lab. It's declining at a concerning rate. The electrodes are degrading. We're replacing them as fast as we can, but we're running out of suitable materials." Vach's elongated fingers tapped thoughtfully against his leg. "I may have a solution to that particular problem. Come with me." Curious, Leah followed the professor through the dimly lit corridors to his research laboratory. Inside, various analysis equipment hummed with power, diverted from non-essential systems. "I've been examining the composition of salt samples from different areas of the plain," Vok explained, bringing up holographic displays of molecular structures. There are significant variations in mineral content and crystal structure. How does that help us? Leah asked, struggling to follow the xenobiologist's train of thought. Some formations contain higher concentrations of magnesium and potassium compounds, Vok continued. These could potentially serve as more efficient electrolytes for your batteries, reducing electrode corrosion and increasing power output. Leah's exhaustion momentarily gave way to excitement. That could make a significant difference. But collecting specific salt formations during a storm isn't exactly feasible. We don't need to, Vok replied, indicating a storage unit in the corner of the lab. I have samples from various locations. Not large quantities, but enough to test and potentially improve your most critical battery cells. For the first time since her arrival, Leah saw the professor in a new light. Despite his initial dismissal of her primitive solution, he was now offering his expertise to improve it. Thank you, Professor, she said sincerely. This could save us. Vok's expression remained impassive, but he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. The survival of this outpost benefits all of us. Engineer Shin. Scientific progress requires living scientists. With Vok's specialized salt samples, Leah and her team were able to create improved electrolyte solutions that significantly enhanced their battery performance. The power output stabilized, ensuring continued operation of the life support systems as the salt storm raged outside. By dawn of the third day, the storm began to abate. The outpost had sustained damage, exterior sensors destroyed, communication arrays compromised, and numerous microfractures in the outer shell. But the core structure remained intact, and most importantly, everyone inside was alive. As the team performed damage assessments, Commander at Carr called an all-hands meeting in the command hub, which was now operating on minimal power from the salt battery network. Our situation remains precarious, the commander announced. External communications are down, and we've lost approximately 60% of our solar collection capacity. But thanks to Engineer Shin's improvised power solution, we've maintained critical systems through the worst of the storm. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the assembled staff. Leah felt a flush of embarrassment at the recognition, especially when Jarek and several others patted her shoulders in congratulation. However, Atkar continued, the salt batteries are a temporary measure. We need to repair our primary power systems if we're to resume normal operations and research activities. The main distribution node is beyond repair, Leah reminded him. We'll need replacement parts from off-world. Precisely, the commander agreed. Which brings me to our next challenge. With external communications down, we can't call for assistance. We need to send a team to the emergency relay station in the eastern salt flats. A tense silence fell over the room. The relay station was nearly 15 kilometers away, across the treacherous salt plains. Now even more dangerous in the storm's aftermath. The expedition rover was damaged in the storm, Drajkul reported. Its power cells were completely drained by electrical discharges. Leah's mind was already racing ahead. We might be able to adapt some of our larger salt batteries to power the rover. Not for a round trip, but possibly enough to reach the relay station. That's extremely risky, Professor Vok interjected. The batteries weren't designed for vehicular power demands. Neither were they designed to keep an entire research outpost alive, Leah countered. But here we are. Commander at Carr's expression was grim, but determined. Engineer Shin, how quickly could you modify the batteries for the rover? With the right team, maybe 6 hours, she estimated. But we'd need to collect more salt from outside, and we'd have to significantly reconfigure the battery arrangement. Do it, the commander ordered. Draj, assist Engineer Shin with whatever she needs. Professor Vok, I need your expertise on the safest route to the relay station, accounting for potential geological changes from the storm. As the meeting dispersed, Leah was surprised when Professor Vok approached her directly. A word. Engineer Shin, he said quietly, guiding her to a relatively private corner of the command hub. "I believe there's another salt formation that might be even more suitable for your vehicular batteries." He brought up a holographic map on his personal device, indicating a location about half a kilometer from the outpost. "My analysis shows higher concentrations of rare earth elements in this deposit. It could significantly enhance conductivity." Leah studied the map with interest. "That's valuable information, Professor. But why are you helping me now, when you initially dismissed the entire concept?" Vox's expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried a hint of what might have been respect. "I am, first and foremost, a scientist. When presented with empirical evidence that contradicts my assumptions, I adjust my hypothesis accordingly. Your primitive solution has proven effective beyond my expectations." It was as close to an apology as she was likely to get from the proud Arcath. Leah nodded, accepting the gesture for what it was. "I'll organize a collection team immediately," she said. "Thank you for the information." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Leah led a small team outside the outpost, protected by environmental suits, to collect salt samples from the formation Vox had identified. The aftermath of the storm had transformed the landscape. New ridges and fissures scarred the once smooth salt plain, and the air was thick with suspended salt particles that reflected the sunlight in dazzling, disorienting patterns. Back inside, they worked feverishly to construct larger, more powerful battery cells and configure them specifically for the rover's power requirements. Jirik proved invaluable, his knowledge of conductive materials helping to optimize the electrode configuration for maximum output. "This is impressive engineering," Draj commented as they installed the battery bank in the rover's power compartment. "Especially considering the limited resources and time constraints." "Sometimes limitations breed innovation," Leah replied, tightening the final connection. "Ready for a test run?" They powered up the rover, holding their breath as the vehicle's systems initialized. The power gauge climbed slowly, but steadily, eventually settling at 72% capacity. "It's not optimal," Leah admitted, "but it should be enough to reach the relay station." Commander Atkar, who had been observing the final preparations, nodded in satisfaction. "Who will volunteer for the expedition team?" To everyone's surprise, Professor Vox stepped forward. "I should go. My knowledge of the terrain and salt formations could prove critical if the rover requires additional power during the journey." "I'll drive," Draj offered, his cybernetic enhancements making him better suited than most for the physically demanding task. Leah hesitated only briefly before adding, "I should go too. If the batteries fail or need adjustment en route, I'm the most qualified to handle it." The commander considered the volunteers thoughtfully. "A 3-person team. Then, make your preparations. You'll depart in 1 hour." As Leah gathered the necessary tools and spare components for the journey, Jirik approached her with evident concern. "The batteries haven't been tested under sustained load," he warned. "And the storm may have left residual electrical charges in the salt beds that could interfere with the power flow." "That's why I'm going," Leah assured him. "To troubleshoot whatever happens along the way." "Just be careful," the young Arcath said awkwardly. "Your innovation saved us all. We need you to return safely." Touched by his concern, Leah gave him a reassuring smile. "We'll be back before you know it, hopefully with a rescue team in tow." An hour later, the expedition team gathered at the outpost's main airlock. Each member carried emergency rations, water purifiers, and basic survival gear. Leah had a toolkit strapped to her belt and a portable diagnostic scanner to monitor the battery performance. Commander Atkar addressed them briefly. "Your mission is critical to our survival. Reach the relay station, send the distress signal, and return if possible. If the rover cannot make the return journey, activate the shelter unit at the relay station and await rescue there." With final checks complete, they boarded the rover and moved into the airlock chamber. As the outer doors opened, Leah felt a surge of apprehension. The salt plains stretched before them, beautiful and deadly in their alien desolation. Draj engaged the rover's drive system, and they lurched forward onto the crusty salt surface. The vehicle's treads crunched through the crystalline terrain, leaving a distinct trail behind them. For the first few kilometers, the journey proceeded smoothly. The battery systems performed admirably, maintaining a steady power flow to the rover's essential systems. Professor Vok sat beside Leah in the rear compartment, monitoring navigational data and occasionally directing Draj to avoid particularly treacherous areas. "The storm has altered the topography significantly," Vok observed, comparing current scans with pre-storm maps. "Several established routes are now impassable." "How much farther to the relay station?" Leah asked, checking the battery output levels, which had already dropped to 61%. "Approximately 9 kilometers," the professor replied. "At our current pace, we should arrive in under an hour." No sooner had he spoken than the rover suddenly lurched and tilted sharply to one side. Draj's cybernetic reflexes engaged instantly, stabilizing the vehicle before it could overturn. "Salt sinkhole," the cyborg reported tersely. "The crust collapsed under our weight." Leah scanned the surrounding area through the viewport. "The storm must have hollowed out pockets beneath the surface. We'll need to proceed more cautiously." Their pace slowed considerably as Draj navigated around visible depressions and tested questionable terrain before committing the rover's full weight. The battery levels continued to drop steadily, now reading 54%. "We're consuming power faster than anticipated," Leah noted with concern. "The rough terrain is increasing the draw." "Can we optimize the power distribution?" Vok inquired, his long fingers tapping nervously against his knee. "I'm already routing power only to essential systems," Leah replied, making minor adjustments to the battery configuration. "If we shut down anything else, we risk losing navigation or environmental controls." They pressed on, the twin suns beating down on the rover's shell, adding thermal stress to their already precarious situation. Inside, the temperature rose steadily as they reduced power to the cooling systems, making the air thick and uncomfortable. At the halfway point of their journey, disaster struck. A brilliant flash of blue-white light erupted from the salt plain ahead, followed by a crackling sound that vibrated through the rover's frame. "Residual electrical discharge!" Vok shouted as the rover's systems flickered. Leah watched in horror as the battery monitors spiked, then plummeted. "The surge is overloading the batteries!" Draj fought with the controls as the rover slowed, then stopped completely. Total power loss, all systems down. For a moment, the three sat in stunned silence, the enormity of their situation sinking in. Stranded in the middle of a hostile salt plain, kilometers from safety in either direction, with no power and limited supplies. "We need to assess the damage," Leah said finally, breaking the paralysis. "Draj, can you check the drive systems? Professor, help me examine the batteries." They donned their environmental suits and exited the rover, the crunching of salt beneath their boots unnervingly loud in the vast silence of the plain. The air was thick with salt particles that clung to their visors, gradually obscuring visibility. Leah accessed the battery compartment, grimacing at what she found. Several cells had ruptured, their electrolyte solutions leaking and crystallizing in the dry air. Others showed severe electrode corrosion. "This is worse than I feared," she told Vok, who was examining the damage with clinical detachment. "At least 30% of the cells are completely destroyed." "Can they be repaired?" the professor asked. Leah shook her head. "Not here. Not with what we have. We'd need replacement electrodes, fresh electrolyte, resources we don't have in the middle of nowhere." Draj joined them, his mechanical eye whirring as it adjusted to the bright conditions. "Drive systems are intact, but without power. They're useless." Leah scanned the horizon, squinting against the glare. The outpost was no longer visible behind them, and the relay station was still far ahead, beyond visual range. They were truly alone in the alien wasteland. "We have three options," she said grimly. "Try to repair enough battery cells to limp back to the outpost. Continue on foot to the relay station, or stay with the rover and wait for rescue, which won't come unless someone reaches the relay station." "The first option seems most practical," Vox suggested. "Returning to the outpost would require less power than continuing forward." "But we still need functioning batteries for that," Leah pointed out. "And I'm not sure we can salvage enough cells." As they debated their options, Draj suddenly tilted his head, his cybernetic sensors picking up something the others couldn't detect. "There's another electrical buildup occurring approximately 2 kilometers southwest of our position." Vox's elongated features contracted in what Leah had learned was an expression of intense thought. "That suggests the presence of a charged salt formation, perhaps similar to the one near the outpost that provided enhanced conductivity." "If we could reach it," Leah said, hope kindling, "we might be able to collect enough material to create new electrolyte solutions for the intact cells." "A dangerous gamble," Draj cautioned. "Moving away from the rover exposes us to the elements with no guarantee of success." "Do we have a choice?" Leah asked. "We can't stay here indefinitely, and we can't move the rover without power." After a brief discussion, they decided that Leah and Professor Vox would trek to the potential salt formation, while Draj remained with the rover, attempting to reconfigure the surviving battery cells for maximum efficiency. The journey across the open salt plain was arduous. Without the rover's protection, they were fully exposed to the harsh conditions: blinding light reflected from the crystalline surface, abrasive salt particles carried on gusting winds, and the constant risk of stepping into a sinkhole or crossing an electrically charged area. Vox, despite his earlier academic aloofness, proved to be a capable field companion. His keen eyes spotted dangerous terrain features before Leah noticed them, and his knowledge of salt formations helped them navigate more efficiently. "You seem quite adept at fieldwork for someone who spends most of their time in a laboratory," Leah commented, as they carefully picked their way across a fissured section of the plain. "I wasn't always an academic," Vox replied, surprising her. "In my younger years, I participated in numerous expeditions across various extreme environments. That experience taught me respect for practical knowledge, a respect I perhaps failed to demonstrate adequately upon your arrival." Leah recognized the statement as another oblique apology. "Well, we all have our specialties. Mine happens to be making things work with whatever's available." "A valuable skill," the professor acknowledged, "and one I underestimated." They walked in companionable silence for a time, conserving energy and focusing on the treacherous terrain. Eventually, they crested a slight ridge and saw what they were looking for: a depression in the salt plain where a distinctly bluish crystalline formation was visible, occasional electrical discharges dancing across its surface. "That's it," Vox confirmed, excitement evident in his voice. "A magnesium-rich salt deposit, highly charged from the recent storm." They approached cautiously, mindful of the electrical activity. Using collection tools from their packs, they carefully gathered samples of the unique salt formation, storing them in insulated containers. "We should hurry back," Leah urged, checking the oxygen levels in her suit. "We've been out longer than planned." As they turned to retrace their steps, a low, rumbling sound vibrated through the ground beneath them. Cracks began to appear in the salt crust, spreading rapidly in all directions. "Salt quake!" Vox shouted, grabbing Leah's arm to steady her as the ground shifted. "Run!" They sprinted across the increasingly unstable terrain, salt chunks breaking away beneath their feet with each step. Behind them, the depression collapsed entirely, swallowed by a gaping sinkhole that continued to expand. Leah's heart pounded as they raced toward the distant silhouette of the rover, the ground still shuddering ominously. A particularly violent tremor sent her stumbling to her knees, the precious salt sample container flying from her grasp and skidding across the fractured surface. "The samples!" she cried, lunging to retrieve the container before it could fall into one of the widening cracks. "Leave it," Vok commanded, pulling her back as a fissure opened exactly where she would have landed. "Your life is worth more than salt." Reluctantly, Leah allowed herself to be guided away from the container, focusing instead on survival as they navigated the treacherous landscape back to the rover. Draj had seen their predicament and moved the vehicle as close as possible, using the minimal power he'd managed to restore. "Get in," the cyborg urged as they approached, his mechanical arm extending to help them aboard. "The quake is destabilizing a large section of the plane." Once inside, Draj engaged the rover's drive system, the vehicle lurching forward on severely limited power. "I reconfigured the remaining functional cells," he explained, as they slowly pulled away from the collapsing area. "We have perhaps 10 minutes of minimal operation." "Head back toward the outpost," Leah instructed. "We lost the salt samples in the quake." "Not entirely," Vok contradicted, producing a small pouch from inside his suit. "I managed to collect a secondary sample before we ran. Significantly smaller than what we lost, but perhaps sufficient for our needs." Leah could have hugged the professor in that moment. Had Arcath physiology been more amenable to such displays? Instead, she immediately set to work, using the rover's compact laboratory equipment to process the salt sample into a usable electrolyte solution. The result was even better than she'd hoped. The unique mineral composition created an electrolyte that generated nearly twice the voltage of their previous solution when applied to the intact battery cells. "This is remarkable," Leah exclaimed as the power readings climbed. "With this efficiency, we might have enough power to reach the relay station after all." "The outpost is closer," Draj pointed out pragmatically. "But the relay station is our mission," Vok countered. "And now, it seems, within our capability." They debated briefly before deciding to push forward to the relay station. The revitalized batteries provided enough power for basic propulsion and life support, though they had to shut down all non-essential systems to conserve energy. The remainder of the journey was tense, with all three constantly monitoring the battery levels and adjusting systems to maximize efficiency. When the relay station finally came into view, a solitary tower rising from the flat expanse, Leah felt a surge of relief that was immediately tempered by a new concern. "The station appears damaged," Draj observed, his enhanced vision picking out details the others couldn't yet see. "The upper antenna array is missing." As they drew closer, the extent of the damage became apparent. The salt storm had torn away much of the station's communication equipment, leaving only the base structure and emergency shelter intact. "This complicates matters," Vok stated unnecessarily, as they parked the rover beside the station and disembarked to investigate. Inside the station's control room, the situation was grim. Most of the communication systems were offline, damaged beyond their ability to repair with available tools and parts. "The emergency beacon is still functional," Draj reported, after examining the equipment. "But its range is limited without the main antenna array. It might not reach the nearest Union outpost." "What about the orbital relay satellites?" Leah asked, searching for alternatives. "Possibly," Vok said, consulting the station's astronomical charts. "There's a Union communications satellite scheduled to pass within range in approximately 4 hours. If we boost the beacon's power output, we might be able to establish contact." "Boost it how?" Draj asked. "We barely have enough power for the rover, let alone additional systems." Leah's mind was already racing ahead. "We repurpose the rover's batteries, connect them directly to the beacon during the satellite's passing." "That would strand us here," the cyborg pointed out, "with no guarantee of successful communication." "If we don't get a message out, we're all stranded anyway," Leah countered. "The outpost is running on borrowed time with the makeshift batteries." The decision was made. They spent the next several hours reconfiguring the rover's power system to interface with the emergency beacon, creating a temporary but powerful transmission capability that would hopefully be sufficient to reach the passing satellite. As the appointed time approached, they gathered in the control room, the makeshift power connection humming ominously as energy flowed from the salt batteries to the beacon transmitter. "Satellite approaching optimal transmission window," Draj announced, monitoring the tracking system. "Beacon powering up." The lights dimmed as power was diverted to the transmitter. Leah held her breath, watching the signal strength indicator fluctuate wildly before stabilizing just above the minimum threshold for successful transmission. Sending distress call now," the cyborg reported, activating the automated message that detailed their situation and coordinates. For several agonizing minutes, they waited for any sign that their message had been received. The satellite passed overhead and began to move out of range, the window of opportunity closing rapidly. Then, just as hope began to fade, the receiver crackled to life with a burst of static, followed by a clear voice. "Relay Station Echo 7. This is Union Vessel Meridian. We have received your distress signal and are altering course to your location. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. Please confirm receipt of this message." The three looked at each other in disbelief before Draj quickly responded, confirming their situation and expressing gratitude for the rescue. When the transmission ended, a wave of relief washed over them. "We did it," Leah said softly, the full weight of their accomplishment sinking in. "Now, we just need to survive another 18 hours." They settled in to wait, making themselves as comfortable as possible in the station's emergency shelter. With the rover's batteries completely drained, they relied on the station's minimal backup power for basic life support. During their wait, Professor Vok grew increasingly curious about the salt samples they had collected, using the station's basic analysis equipment to examine their composition. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying the results. These salt formations contain trace microbial structures, fossilized, but distinctly biological in origin. "I thought you said no life could survive in the salt fields," Leah reminded him, peering over his shoulder at the analysis display. "No current life," Vok clarified. "But these fossils suggest that, at some point in this planet's history, organisms adapted to extreme saline conditions did exist here." "And if they existed once," Leah began, "would they might still exist in some form?" The professor completed her thought. "Perhaps in dormant states, or in microenvironments we haven't yet identified." The discovery seemed to energize Vok, who spent hours theorizing about potential adaptations that might allow organisms to survive in hypersaline conditions. Leah listened with growing interest, offering occasional insights from her engineering perspective about energy storage and conservation mechanisms. "Your salt batteries," Vok said, suddenly, as if struck by a new thought. "They demonstrate a principle that these theoretical organisms might utilize, storing electrical potential in mineral structures for later use." "Biobatteries," Leah mused. "It's not impossible. Some Earth organisms use similar principles for sensing electrical fields or generating bioelectricity." Their scientific discussion helped pass the time and distracted them from the discomfort of their situation. Even Draj, whose cybernetic enhancements made him less susceptible to environmental stresses, participated in the speculation, offering analogies to synthetic energy systems he'd encountered in his travels. 18 hours later, right on schedule, the Union rescue vessel arrived. The team was evacuated from the relay station and transported first to the research outpost to collect the remaining personnel and essential equipment, then off-world to the nearest Union station for medical evaluation and debriefing. In the weeks that followed, the Nmara outpost was temporarily abandoned, while a specialized engineering team was dispatched to repair the damage and implement upgraded protection systems against future salt storms. Leah, having proven her value beyond doubt, was appointed to lead the power system's redesign. More surprisingly, Professor Vok experienced something of a professional renaissance. His revised hypothesis about potential life forms in Silurian 9's salt plains, inspired by their expedition and Leah's improvised batteries attracted significant attention in xenobiological circles. He requested that Leah collaborate on a paper about energy utilization in extreme environments, bridging their respective fields in a novel approach. 3 months later, a completely refurbished Enmara outpost reopened with an expanded research mandate. The new facility included a dedicated power research laboratory, where Leah continued to refine her salt battery technology, developing more efficient versions that could serve as reliable backups for frontier outposts across the Union. On the day of the reopening ceremony, Leah stood at the viewport of her new laboratory, gazing out at the vast salt plains that had nearly claimed their lives. The crystalline landscape glittered beneath the alien suns, beautiful and deadly as ever. Professor Vok joined her, his tall form reflected in the transparent barrier that separated them from the harsh environment outside. "The supply ship brought the latest equipment for our joint research project," he informed her. "And something else you might find interesting." He handed her a small, transparent container. Inside was a tiny, dark speck, barely visible against the white salt crystals that surrounded it. "What is it?" Leah asked, holding the container up to the light. "A living microorganism," Vok replied, his voice carrying a note of genuine excitement. "Discovered in a deep core sample from the eastern salt beds. It appears to utilize a crystalline structure to store electrical energy, much like your batteries." Leah stared at the minuscule life form with wonder. "So you were wrong. Life does survive in the salt fields after all." "I was wrong," Vok acknowledged without hesitation. "And I have never been happier to admit it. This discovery could revolutionize our understanding of extremophile adaptations, and possibly improve our battery technology," Leah added, already considering the potential applications. "Indeed," the professor agreed. "It seems that, once again, the solution to our scientific challenges lies in unexpected connections between disciplines, between species, and between the theoretical and the practical." Outside, a gentle salt breeze drifted across the plains, carrying microscopic particles that caught the light like countless tiny stars. Within those particles, perhaps, were more secrets waiting to be discovered, more impossible things proving possible through human ingenuity and alien wisdom working in harmony. Commander Atkar found them still at the viewport, deep in discussion about bioelectrical systems and evolutionary adaptations. He cleared his throat to gain their attention. "The Union Science Council has approved your joint research proposal," he announced. "Full funding for 2 standard years, with priority access to resources and expedition support." Leah and Vok exchanged surprised glances. Their proposal had been ambitious, combining xenobiology and engineering in ways that traditionally conservative funding bodies often hesitated to support. "There's more," the commander continued. "They're calling it the Jin Directive, a new protocol requiring all frontier outposts to incorporate emergency power systems based on locally available resources. Your salt batteries are becoming standard equipment throughout the Union's Exploration Division." Pride swelled in Leah's chest, not just for the recognition, but for the lives that might be saved by her improvised solution, born of desperate necessity. "Perhaps," Professor Vok suggested with uncharacteristic sentimentality, "we should propose a toast to celebrate these developments." Commander Atkar produced a flask of shimmering blue liquid, a rare Arkath beverage reserved for significant occasions. They shared the ritual drink, standing before the vast salt plains that had nearly claimed their lives, but had instead become the foundation of a new understanding. "To unexpected solutions," Leah offered, raising her small cup. "To life where none was thought possible," Vok added. "To cooperation across differences," Atkar concluded, as the twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, casting long purple shadows across the crystalline landscape. Leah felt a profound sense of belonging. She had come to Silurian 9 as an outsider, a human engineer assigned to a routine maintenance position, She would remain as a pioneer, her name forever associated with the hostile but beautiful world of salt that had challenged her to innovate beyond all expectations. In the distance, the first sparkles of a mild salt storm flickered like stars being born. But this time, they watched without fear, secure in the knowledge that they had learned to harness the very elements that had once threatened their survival. Life, like knowledge, found a way to persist even in the most inhospitable environments. All it needed was the right conditions, the right connections, and sometimes the simplest of solutions to the most complex of problems.